The first time it said my name, I was standing in the hallway outside room 217 at 2:47 in the morning. I had my recorder running. I had my journal. I had every rational explanation I needed preloaded and ready. The voice came from inside the room I had just locked behind me. Low, deliberate, my name, exactly. Not a misheard Siog resolving into a name. My name, whole and correct, from a room I had just confirmed was empty. I want to tell you I left. I want to tell you I packed my bag and drove back down to Denver and never thought about it again. I stayed 2 more nights. I need you to understand what happened in those 2 nights, not because I want to scare you, because I think it came home with me, and I think it's listening right now.
I am a writer. That is relevant. People who write about things for a living have a specific, privately embarrassing relationship with the things they write about. We need the experience. We believe, on some level, that proximity to the real thing will transfer something to the page that research alone cannot. I had been commissioned to write a long-form piece on American haunted landmarks. The Stanley Hotel was the obvious centerpiece. Stephen King's inspiration for The Overlook, for The Shining, for the whole architecture of a building that turns on you. I booked room 217. Notorious. The most requested haunted room. Elizabeth Wilson, the housekeeper, nearly died there in a gas explosion in 1911, and reportedly never left. I believed in none of it. I believed in the story of people who believed in it. That distinction felt important at the time. It stopped feeling important by the second night.
I have been in a lot of old buildings. Historic hotels have a particular atmosphere. The accumulated weight of people who have slept and argued and celebrated and grieved in the same walls. I know that feeling. I know how to metabolize it as texture rather than threat. The Stanley felt different from the lobby. I noticed it before I had my key. Not threatening, not supernatural, just attentive. As if the building registered my arrival and was paying close attention. I told myself it was suggestion, the myth of the place shaping perception. Classic psychological priming. The desk clerk asked if I'd stayed before. I said no, first time. She smiled. Room 217, she said. The hotel will make sure you feel welcome. I thought it was a rehearsed line for the ghost tour tourists. It wasn't a line.
I went to bed at 11 with my recorder running and my notebook on the pillow beside me. Practical, professional, prepared to observe and document. At 1 a.m., I woke up. No sound, no specific stimulus, just awake. Completely. The way you are when something has changed. I looked at the mirror. My reflection was looking at something to my left. I was looking straight at the mirror. I sat with that for what felt like a very long time. I ran the explanations. Trick of the light, old glass that distorts, my half-asleep brain misreading angle. I turned my head left. There was nothing there. The corner of the room. The old wainscoting. I looked back at the mirror. My reflection was looking straight at me now.
I wrote it down. I told myself it was the beginning of a very good article. I found Diana on my second morning. I had been asking questions that the day staff answered with the polish of people trained to be charming about the supernatural. The official story, the ghost tour version, comfortable and contained. Diana worked nights. She had been at the Stanley for 31 years. She sat down across from me without being asked and looked at my recorder and said, "You can use that. What I'm going to tell you is true." She told me about the Blood Jinn. Not as legend, as operational information. She told me about Elias Vance, the king, and what he had attempted in the ballroom in the winter of 1923. She told me that some of the staff had seen it, that the older night shift workers had a protocol, specific things you do not do after 2 a.m., specific rooms where the lights stay on, specific ways of moving through the building that are less of an invitation. She told me it was particularly interested in people who came looking for it. Writers, she said, with something that was not quite a smile. Researchers. People who ask questions. She looked at my notebook. People like you.
I spent 4 hours in the hotel archive. Elias Vance arrived at the Stanley in the summer of 1922. He was 53 years old, wealthy from mining interests, and deeply serious about what he called the science of the unseen. He had studied under several European occultists, whose names surface in the darker margins of early 20th century esoterica. He believed that jinn, beings described in Islamic tradition as created from smokeless fire, existing in parallel to humanity, could be perceived, communicated with, and in rare cases, bound, made to serve. He believed the Stanley Hotel sat on a convergence, an intersection of geological formations and altitude that thinned the boundary between the physical world and the planes jinn inhabit. On December 14th, 1923, he conducted what his private journals called the final ceremony in the hotel ballroom. He intended to bind a blood jinn, a jinn of exceptional age and power, corrupted by previous unjust bindings, known in the texts he studied as Al-Masud al-Dim, the bound one of blood. He intended to make it the hotel's guardian, a permanent protector bound to the building and to the guests who slept within it. He was found dead in the basement on March 4th, 1931. Diana had told me not to go to the ballroom after midnight. Those were her exact words, not a suggestion, a specific, quietly urgent instruction. I am a writer. I went to the ballroom after midnight. It was empty. I stood in the center of it and I ran my recorder and I looked at the space where Elias Vance had stood in that photograph with his hands raised, and I felt absolutely nothing, which I noted with some professional disappointment. And then the chandeliers dimmed, all at once. No flicker, just a single decisive drop in light, as if someone had adjusted a dial. And I heard it. Not a voice, not yet. A sound at the far end of the room. Like something very large and very old settling its weight. The sound of something that has been still for a long time, beginning slowly to move. I stood completely still. I thought about what Diana had said about people who came looking for it. I thought about the fact that I was holding a recording device. I thought, I am doing exactly what she told me not to do.
I left the ballroom. I walked. I did not run. I made myself not run, and I did not look back. When I got to my room and played the recording back, there was a sound at the 12-minute mark. My name. Deliberate. Close. From directly behind where I had been standing.
There is a lower level at the Stanley that is not on the guest tour. I found it because Diana, in the act of warning me away from it, had described its location with the specific accuracy of someone who goes there sometimes and does not want to admit why. I went down the next morning. The corridor smelled of old stone and something else, something dry and mineral that I did not have a referent for. At the end of the corridor, in a room that contained nothing except a non-operational boiler from the 1920s, I found the floor. Under layers of gray institutional paint that had been poorly applied over something they had wanted to cover, the markings were still there, scraped into the stone beneath the paint. Geometric, precise, the kind of thing that takes time and intention. I took photographs. I recorded everything I saw. I sent the photographs to 3 separate scholars of Islamic esotericism and pre-modern occultism. All 3 responded within 48 hours. 2 of them asked me to delete the photographs and not discuss what I had found. The 3rd told me what the markings were for. They were not for binding. They were for calling.
I kept every light on. I sat with my back to the headboard, and I waited. At 3:17 a.m., the far corner of the room got warm. Not the rest of the room. The corner. A localized, specific warmth in a space. I spent a week after I came home going through everything I had recorded and researched and photographed. I learned more about Elias Vance, about what his journals actually said versus what the publicly available summaries suggested. He had not been trying to bind a protector. He had been trying to free one. Al-Masood al-Dim, the Blood Jinn, had been previously bound to the land long before F.O. Stanley ever broke ground on his hotel. Vance believed the Jinn was suffering, that the original binding, conducted centuries earlier by parties his research never fully identified, had been punitive and unjust. He had gone to the Stanley to release it. The ceremony in December 1923 was not a summoning. It was an attempted liberation. He failed, and the failure damaged the binding further. It didn't break it. It made it worse, angrier, more present.
I submitted the article. It was published. It was well received. My editor said it was the best thing I had ever written. I told people the story at parties, the way writers do. The Stanley Hotel, room 217, the voice, the ballroom, the corner of the room that went warm. I performed enough distance from it that people laughed in the places that were supposed to be funny and went quiet in the places that were supposed to land. I became very good at performing the distance. 3 months after I came home, I noticed the mirror in my hallway. I have had that mirror for 6 years. I know exactly how it reflects the hallway. I know exactly what angle my reflection looks back from. My reflection looks slightly to the left now. Not always. Not every time. But enough times that I have stopped checking. I have thought about what Diana told me. About the protocol. About the things the long-serving night staff do not do.
and the ways they move through the building, and the specific habits that constitute their private peace with the presence that lives inside the Stanley. I think those habits are portable. I think the presence is portable. I think when it said too late, it was not speaking to me about Vance's failed liberation. I think it was telling me something about what had already happened. Something that had occurred the moment I walked into that ballroom with a recording device and asked, in the language of a skeptic who was secretly hoping to be proven wrong, for evidence. It gave me evidence. And then it followed me home to give me more.